My sibling wouldn't stop boasting about her previous brief romance with my soon-to-be husband during my marriage celebrations. So when he eventually lost his temper and labeled her fixated and unsettling at the practice meal, my father declared he wouldn't escort me during the ceremony unless we expressed regret. Thus, yesterday night an event occurred at my trial supper, and my nuptials are set for the following day. Therefore, I truly require some immediate advice on this matter at this moment. To provide background, the man whom I'm 28, woman uniting with my betrothed Jake, 28, man, shared a short affair with my stepsister Maddie, 26, woman, around 6 years back. They connected via a matchmaking application and enjoyed a few outings that led nowhere in the end. Then, roughly 2 years afterward, he encountered me via acquaintances, and we connected well and began a relationship. It wasn't until sometime later that we discovered his link to Maddie. But truly, it was merely several meetings and no significant developments occurred. So it didn't trouble us greatly. Moreover, I'm not particularly attached to Maddie. I rarely encounter her, and frankly, if not for my father, I wouldn't maintain any connection with her. So it truly wasn't a major concern. But despite that, I preferred not to include her in the wedding. Yet my father somewhat convinced me, and sadly I didn't wish to argue with him, so I simply consented. And Maddie received an invitation to the event, and she's been completely unbearable regarding it. She attended the betrothal gathering too, and the events leading up to the wedding, and she continues to exploit her former association with Jake as though it held deep significance. She won't cease mentioning it regardless of whether she's jesting about it or otherwise. She's simply discussing it non-stop, and I believed I could disregard it and she might halt. But eventually it grew evident that she was attempting to diminish me in some manner. And this was her method of undermining me by exaggerating the type of bond she had with Jake. It irritated him too, but I genuinely didn't desire any conflict prior to my marriage. So I figured we could overlook it collectively. We both had resolved that we wouldn't address it and we'd simply dismiss her and wish that she'd possess some dignity and cease mentioning it since she clearly wasn't receiving recognition. But then during the practice supper, she uttered some foolish quip that I can't recall concerning her connection with Jake and his demeanor from that period, and he simply erupted. He rebuked her and stated there was a cause he ceased pursuing her, and she was rejected, and it stemmed from her being incredibly irritating. And he recalled how she had been excessively attached and possessive since right after the initial pair of outings, she began discussing matrimony and similar topics despite them being fairly youthful at that time. And beyond that, he mentioned how he viewed her as eerie because several days following their final outing, she chose to contact his mom despite them scarcely knowing one another for a brief period, and he clearly wasn't prepared to present her to his folks. But she proceeded on her own, and that was the reason he ended things with her, as she had crossed limits, and even currently she was repeating the behavior because she simply couldn't grasp the clue. He informed her that she exudes uncertainty, and thus something is amiss with her, and then she began sobbing noisily and fled the area. My father followed her, and it was quite clear that he was highly displeased with us both. But I believe they did what was necessary. Since then, we haven't encountered her as she's declined to emerge from her accommodation in the lodging. And merely a few hours earlier, my father requested me and Jake to visit his space and informed us that he had concluded that because we had distressed Maddie, we must express remorse or otherwise he wouldn't participate in the wedding or accompany me along the path. I considered that truly unjust, and I engaged in a terrible dispute with him. But I truly don't desire this currently since I'm actually marrying the next day. I realize that my father believes Jake and I are the villains in this, but I simply don't perceive it that way. But I also don't wish for him to miss the event. So AITA for permitting my betrothed to offend my stepsister at my practice supper prior to our marriage. Edit. All right. So I omitted numerous details regarding my family interactions in my entry since I didn't believe it pertained to the circumstance, but I'll provide you all additional background. So, essentially, my parents didn't mesh well. Well, they were wedded. They courted in university, and they solely tied the knot because my mother became expectant with me, and they faced considerable stress from their relatives. From what I've learned, the gestation was quite challenging as such, and my parents understood that they didn't care for each other greatly. When I was 3, my mom was unfaithful to my dad with one of her companions, and that concluded their union. She confessed to him and they sought separation. They jointly raised me until I reached adulthood, and when I was 15, my grandparents revealed everything to me. When I was 1, my dad began courting one of his pals from secondary school, and shortly they produced Maddie. Although we were fairly near in years and we were half-siblings, Maddie and I didn't interact much since my dad only possessed me for the weekends, and I suppose she envied me or such. In any case, the key is during childhood I didn't truly possess a positive bond with her. I didn't observe much of her, and in our grown-up existences, we solely must encounter each other when it's utterly inevitable. But aside from that, we lack a bond. My mom, sadly, departed a few years past, so presently I solely possess my dad, and irrespective of how their union fared, both endeavored to nurture me. So clearly, I do cherish my dad significantly in my existence. Additionally, even during our youth, he never caused me to sense that I was less vital to him than Maddie. Actually, he has expressed to me multiple times that he would have adored having me with him beyond merely the weekend. But sadly, my mother wouldn't permit that, and she originally desired complete guardianship of me, but my dad wasn't okay with that. So it had already required much for them to reach a guardianship accord that both could accept. He didn't wish to prolong it more. In any case, the key is, despite what's occurring with Maddie, I do maintain a positive bond with my dad otherwise, and I don't want that destroyed. Edit 2, hello. So I merely want to explain a few additional matters. There are numerous individuals in the remarks criticizing my mother for whatever transpired. I just wish to state I don't believe I have the authority to claim that she was an ideal person like all others. She possessed her shortcomings, but neither was my father flawless. They possessed their issues. And although she was the one who had been disloyal, even my father concurs that he was the one who pushed her toward it. He was awful to her during much of her gestation. He disregarded her, and he understood the sort of strain she endured from her parents since they were somewhat traditional and wouldn't accept it if she chose to seek separation. So he exploited that and assumed her presence. She had her problems. She initiated arguments with him over the tiniest matters, and he ensured not to assist with any domestic tasks and such, and forced her to handle everything and remained absent until late daily. And it was essentially torment for both since they were penalizing one another. I mean, I'm not claiming that infidelity was the correct answer, but I believe the circumstance wasn't that simple for her either. And regarding the cause why she chose to pursue complete guardianship and wasn't prepared to surrender more than the weekends for my father, it was because she was displeased with him as he chose to begin seeing another lady while they were still finalizing the separation. And he was contesting her strongly on the quantity of support and child aid he would provide even though he knew that she hadn't managed to employment since she became expectant directly from university, and then wedded. So she truly didn't possess anything personal at that moment. And since her parents weren't aiding her either, she had to depend on her companions to even cover the attorney. So, matters were already quite poor between them. And I'm merely stating that things were extraordinarily chaotic for the pair, and I honestly cannot declare who was correct and who was incorrect or such. Update 1. Hey, so it's approximately 6 in the evening currently, and since yesterday night, my father and I haven't communicated following our argument about the issue with Maddie. My betrothed and I have conversed. We've reviewed the remarks and such, and we've discussed it with our pals, and all believe we don't owe anyone remorse because Maddie had essentially been irritating everyone. All had just been too polite to mention anything since they didn't desire to initiate any conflict. But she was clearly seeking the adverse type of notice, and she obtained it. So now she can't complain about the outcomes of her own deeds. That's simply not equitable. Additionally, it is logical for my father to require that Jake express regret to Maddie. But I don't comprehend why he believes that I should express regret. Actually, if anything, she's the one who ought to express regret to me currently, because she's the one who generated all this turmoil merely because she desired notice. She also realizes that there was virtually nothing noteworthy about her bond with Jake. They merely enjoyed a few outings 6 years prior. Nothing resulted from it, and that was all. It signified nothing to him. And I'm fairly certain that it signified nothing to her either until she discovered that I was uniting with this man. Then suddenly, she couldn't cease discussing it, and all that Jake had stated was truly accurate. Everyone in his acquaintance group knows her as the fixated woman he dated, and they had turned it into a complete jest back when it occurred. Even his mom recalls her, but all were gracious enough not to mention it since they didn't wish to humiliate her. So I don't comprehend how, when so many accommodations had been provided for her, she still possessed the nerve to continue raising this merely to demean me and seek attention. If my dad cannot perceive that, then I don't know what to tell him. I don't comprehend why he believes we owe her remorse, but we truly don't. So, I'm going to inform him that if he desires to attend the event and escort me along the path, then he's welcome to. And if not, he and Maddie can depart. Clearly, it's not perfect, but it's my marriage day for heaven's sake. I'm not going to permit anyone to spoil it with their outbursts, not even my father. It's a significant enough matter that I included Maddie merely to be gracious, because he desired me to respect the bond that I had with her as a sibling. He was actually even urging for me to include his spouse. But that was where I set the boundary, because I knew that my mom wouldn't have approved that. In any case, the key is because he requested me to, I included her. But if he believes I'm going to allow her to act however she wishes and dominate us, then I'm sorry, but that's simply not going to occur. Update 2. Hey, so after I created that entry a few hours prior, my betrothed and I went to my dad's space, and we informed him that if he does not desire to participate in the event and does not desire to escort me along the path, then he's free to depart with Maddie. But given the present situation, neither Jake nor I feel especially motivated to express regret to her. And actually, we would truly value it if she departed. I informed him that I had considered it, and it was quite clear that Maddie had been attempting to demean me during the period she had spent here. All had observed it. It was not merely something that I had invented in my mind. So there was no purpose in him attempting to protect her. All our pals, a few of my relatives, and even my future relatives concurred that Maddie's conduct had been quite odd. And whatever transpired at the practice supper, it was the accumulated irritation due to her actions. So she can't feign that it was entirely our responsibility. Additionally, all that had been uttered was accurate. So I don't believe we need to express regret for any of that. If she had simply remained silent like a typical attendee and maintained composure instead of being such an attention pursuer, then no one would have needed to utter anything whatsoever. So while we could concur that Jake had been quite impolite, he had his justifications, and neither of us thought that he should express regret. I informed my father that I would have truly adored for him to be present for my marriage, and for him to have escorted me along the path because now that my mom's no longer here, he's my sole surviving parent. So it would have signified much to me. But if he believes that he does not desire to be here, I can't compel him. So he's free to depart. And even though it caused me great sorrow to state that, I still managed to express it all with as much composure as I possessed. After listening to me, my dad began telling me that he had uttered all that impulsively, and it was merely because he did not desire anyone to harm his daughters. He appeared quite disheartened, and I sensed that he had also reflected on all that had transpired and likely had altered his view. Once we finished conversing, he informed both Jake and me that he was the one who was mistaken, and that we shouldn't have needed to express regret for anything because we didn't initiate anything yesterday night.